What is agroforestry? Basically, it's all about getting more trees on farmland, and we'll go into a bit of detail about how that works. So we've got an agroforestry team, or the Agro Four, and they are myself, Nick, the project manager, top left, Ethan, who can't be with us tonight, the community officer, deals with schools and community groups. Dan shares a role with Solvi. They're both volunteering officers, and Dan is our grafting guru. So any questions about how to graft an apple tree, ask Dan in the chat. So yeah, well, the Kindling Trust has been going for a few years now, and we've been working to champion local food production and organic farming, creating a more sustainable food system. And we've only just joined in February, but it's all been very exciting. And the next stage of the project, of the farm's vision, is to the Kindling Trust vision is to build a farm on the edge of Manchester, and that will supply sustainable food and fruit and vegetables to the local people. And we're hoping it's going to be a bit of a model farm for how you can produce organic fruit and veg. So the Kindling Farm itself will be an agroforestry farm. So that's why we're going to tell you more about agroforestry, and it's going to have lots of benefits for climate, getting more trees in the landscape, fixing carbon. It's going to be organic, so there'll be no sprays, there'll be more wildlife, biodiversity, and we think it's a model that could be a good one for farmers in the future to take forward. So we're going to tell you a bit more about what agroforestry is tonight. And basically it's growing trees on farms. And I mean, you may know agroforestry without really thinking about it. You may have seen hedgerows, windbreaks, trees in pasture, small woodland copses, or orchards with sheep or hens in. They're all agroforestry systems. Now the Kindling Farm will use what's called silver agroforestry, where there's rows of trees with alleys of vegetables or cereals in between. So silvo is the tree part, arable is the crop part, and we're going to have fruit trees in this case. So apple trees, pears, green gages, plums, damsons, maybe some cherries, and a few hazel. And these will give us a more diverse harvest from the land than you would if you were just growing cereal crops or pasture for animals. And it's more resilient against climate change, pests and diseases. So we feel it's really a good way forward. And how silver arable systems work is that the crops obviously, and the trees do have a bit of competition above and below ground, but the trees are basically taking up vertical space that is on a farm is normally being wasted in a field. And the roots are, the trees will go deeper than the arable crops, and that will help reduce competition for nutrients and water, and will also retain some nutrients to stop leaching. So yeah, the main things when you're planning an agroforestry system to be aware of is competition for light, water, and nutrients. Obviously, the reason why everyone doesn't grow trees on wheat fields is because trees cast shade. So we don't want necessarily, we want to be careful where the shade is going. Trees and crops will compete for water and nutrients. So we need to look at this very carefully when we're designing a system. And the negative competition can result from, yes, shared root zones, nutrient competition. The trees intercept rainfall with the canopy. They can shade the crops, and you can get some what are called allelopathic trees, where they've evolved to stop vegetation growing beneath them for competition to prevent competition. So they release chemicals that actually poison the nearby crops. So we wouldn't want them in our agroforestry systems. But then you do get positive complementary components in the system, such as the trees can shelter crops from winds, which can raise the temperature in a field. And where you get raised temperatures, you get more growth, more yield, and they reduce evapotranspiration because there's less wind coming through the field. So that stops water stress, and that's good for crop yield as well. The trees, as I mentioned, can retain and recycle nutrients because they've got deeper roots, and this through leaf fall, this can go back into the soil in the crop rooting zone. There's reduced soil erosion due to wind and surface runoff, and some trees can even fix nitrogen. So alder is a good one. Will fix nitrogen from the atmosphere into the soil that other crops can then use around them. So here's a silver arable system with wheat and poplar. In the northern hemisphere, we grow the rows of trees and crops from north to south orientation, and that way you get the maximum amount of sunlight as the sun passes through the sky from east to west. There's limited shading from the trees, and then you can side prune the trees. We wouldn't do this with the apples, but if you were growing a timber crop in your agroforestry system, you can side prune the trees, allowing more light in, and it's also better for the timber because you don't get the knots. And because there will be some cultivation of the crops, there will be a slight pruning of the tree roots, encouraging them to go down and under the arable crop. So again, this reduces competition. So this is a very rough drawing of how an agroforestry system can work. Again, you've got some competition, shade from the trees, but then which reduces yield, but then this is more than made up for by the increased shelter, reduced wind speeds, higher temperatures in the middle of the alley of the crop where growth and yield will be better. And you can see there's a shared root zone where the crops and the trees both get their nutrients and water from, but mostly because of the cultivation, the trees are going to go below that into deeper soil horizons, and they will prevent leaching and actually recycle nutrients. So for anyone who's interested in permaculture or organic gardening, you'll know that a more diverse garden or farm is going to have more types of plants and is therefore better for biodiversity and plant health. So in a monoculture, there's only food for pests. So if you're just growing broad beans, there'll be just food for blackfly. And if you've not got any hedges, wide field margins, or anything else there, you won't have the necessary habitats for the ladybirds that might come in and eat these blackflies. So we're providing, by agroforestry, we're providing shelter for predators, so the pest species don't normally reach any sort of problem population, and that way we don't have to spray or use pesticides. So it's a bonus all round, really. And this is what is called a beetle bank, which you could along where the tree rows are, you could plant herbs, flowering plants and legumes, and they will provide not only a break in the crop so that predators pests can't find their food so easily, but you're also providing habitat for the predators, so you not just your beetles, your ladybirds, your hoverfly and your spiders can all live in there and go out into the arable crop and predate on the pests, keeping them into a nice balance, because that's what we want at the end of the day, is a balanced system where we don't have to spray everything, and because it just gets on your food in the end, doesn't it? So yeah, research has also shown that by having your apples spread out in rows rather than in an orchard in an agroforestry system, the pests find it more hard to find the particular food they're looking for. So you get less cases of scab in an agroforestry system. And when you're trying to maybe sell apples or give them away in a veg box, no one really wants to see a scabby apple, do they? So it's good for pests and diseases as well as biodiversity. And if you compare a field of wheat with a traditional orchard to a silver arable system, an agroforestry system, it won't produce as much of the single components, say the wheat and the apples, compared to a traditional system, but it will produce more overall. So we can compare the production from an agroforestry system to single cropping by something that's called the land equivalent ratio. And that's where we divide basically the yield of the apples in the agroforestry system by the yield of the apples in the orchard, and add that to the yield of the wheat in agroforestry system divided by the yield in the monoculture field. And this sort of comparison gives us a land equivalent ratio of 1.4. And what that means is for to grow the same amount of wheat and apples in a single crop system, you would need 140 hectares of wheat and apples to produce the same amount from 100 hectares of the agroforestry system. So it is more productive. You don't necessarily get the same amount of wheat from a field or apples from an orchard, but it's more productive overall. And also you've got more resilience. If one crop component fails, if the wheat fails because of flooding, you've got the apples to fall back on. So it gives you economic resilience as well, because a farmer can still sell something at the end of the year. And it's also, you know, it's good for the future of the farmers. So next, I think we're coming on to, oh yes, agroforestry is a rich history. It's not just something that's come about. It's been around more than 6,000 years in some parts of the world, and its examples of agroforestry systems around the world include tea with shade trees, countries like India and Sri Lanka, home gardens, forest gardens I've seen in Sri Lanka. Great systems. Obviously, they've got a lot more light and rainfall in the tropics, so you can have a more diverse system. Whereas if you go to the Mediterranean, you might have the light, but you don't have the moisture. So you might go for lavender with walnuts here. Now, we couldn't grow that very well in this country because we don't have the sunshine, but we do have the water. So we might go for potatoes with rows of apple trees. And another old system that you'll have heard of probably is in the Middle Ages. Pigs were traditionally kept under oak trees to forage on the acorns, and this was known as pannage. So that's a picture of me with my pigs at the allotment in my best tunic. And yes, they look very healthy pigs underneath, don't they? So yeah, there's agroforestry has been around for a long time. It's kind of died out in the 20th century because we industrialized farming after the war. Agriculture, fruit production, and forestry were all divided up into separate disciplines so that it could be supposedly more efficient. But this doesn't look particularly great to me. The monoculture conifer plantation, there's no light getting in there. I mean, they're planted very close together so that they grow straight and produce straight planks, but it really doesn't help with the vegetation or anything else that might live in the forest. So it's not very healthy at all for wildlife. And then I see this a lot in Cheshire where I live. Monoculture maize fields grown year after year on the same land for cattle fodder, and it's just terrible for the soil. I mean, the new agroforestry farm at Kindling Farm will have crop rotation at its heart, because we appreciate you have to look after your soil. You don't grow the same thing year on year. You don't rely on chemical inputs for your nutrients. So yeah, we just think agroforestry is a much better way all round. And then I'm going to come on to Dan now for the region's fruit heritage. So can you see the screen okay, Dan?
Yep. Can everyone hear me? Or can you hear me, Nick? Good. So yeah, I've got a funny background really into how I've become known as a fruit expert, but I was just a silly, well, not, I was a guy sat in a pub in Moss Side many years ago, about 11 years ago, and basically thinking, oh, wouldn't it be great if we grew apples locally in Moss Side and then turned those to juice and cider and sold it as cider and call it Moss Cider. And that idea in the pub turned into a little thriving business, and we grew that to where we were producing about 14,000 bottles of cider a year. And during that time, I obviously met a lot of people who had fruit and orchards. And interestingly, the other hat that I wear is working for the national charity, the Orchard Project. And when they first started and employed me in 2015, they looked at Greater Manchester, and whereas my other colleagues had been planting lots and lots of new community orchards, they looked at Manchester and they were actually really surprised at how many orchards there already were. And it turns out, you know, Manchester's got a rich fruit heritage. You know, it used to be famed for pears coming out of Carrington, and I've seen some of the old pear trees. I've been on a few adventures looking for these random old pear trees that are now hidden on old rubbish tips, or like Victorian rubbish tips. But one lady in particular really stands out. So that was a lady called Mary Eastwood. If anyone knows or has heard of Mary Eastwood, you'll know what a legend she was. Unfortunately, she died probably about 18 months ago. She was well into her 80s, if not her early 90s. And you know, she and others were responsible for setting up projects that are now, so the current name is Parswood Environment Centre in Didsbury, which, if you can imagine Didsbury, if you know Manchester well, you'll know you sort of leave the city centre and you've now just got urban sprawl all the way from the city centre all the way out to, you know, beyond the M60. But imagine 1950s kind of, Manchester, and you've got Parswood Environment Centre on the fringes of the city, and you'd still be, you know, you'd probably see fields between Withington and Fallowfield and Rusholme, and you know, so that was where kids used to get shipped out to learn about how to be a farmer and things like that. So it's kind of begs belief really in kind of modern times to believe that that was the case. But yeah, that was a child's adventure in kind of, this is what rural life is like, if you can imagine that, if you know Manchester well. So yeah, quite a funny story. But yeah, Mary was a real pivotal lady involved in that, setting up that, and then she set up probably what is I would consider the best community orchard, certainly in Greater Manchester, and that's at Timperley Allotments, which is down near Hayes Lane in Timperley. Just an incredible orchard of well-selected fruit that does well in our climate. So, you know, that was where I first tasted my first Ashmead kernel, and they've got all sorts. They've got one little local variety, you know, very little about, called Rake Maker. The little research that I found out about that is its home is in Stockport, where I am. But yeah, she was just an absolute living legend, and she rubbed off on me, and I think that's why I'm so now obsessed with local varieties and heritage grafting, fallen in love with grafting as well. So yeah, that's me basically. I mean, Nick, do you want me to say anything in particular? Have I covered that?
No, that's great. I mean, yeah, there's more out there than you realise, really. I think that's what Dan's trying to say. It wasn't that long ago in the 20th century where the big cities all had, you know, market gardens around them with huge fruit and vegetable production to supply the population. But now we just go into the supermarket and buy apples from New Zealand and strawberries from Morocco and don't even think about it, do we? But maybe there is a middle way, you know, combining the old and the new ways that we can go down. Yeah. So thank you, Dan, for that. We'll move on to getting involved in the project. So can I hand over to you, Solvi?
You can. Yeah. So I think the most exciting part of the project is just how much we need volunteers to make it happen. I started out I guess, the kindling journey by coming to volunteer at Woodbank. Especially during the pandemic as well, like when lockdown was happening, it was really ramping up production to ensure that they could fulfill the increase in veg bags. And I think as well, like that for me had a huge effect on wanting me to do something very different and wanting to like cultivate a very different relationship with the land and grow it. And so I kind of think like volunteering with the kindling is a bit more than volunteering. Like volunteering, the word doesn't do it justice, because I've learned so much from this that it feels like it's just far more than that, if that makes sense. So, and I think when we think about like just the kind of task that's ahead of us, I think both Nick and Dan, you've identified just how much needs to change with the food system. We realize how big that is. We know that we're not going to be able to do it just with a few experts, but we're going to need everybody. And I think the fantastic part about Kindling and about the agroforestry farm, the fact that it's a community farm, means that we are going to get people from all walks of life, very diverse experiences and backgrounds and abilities. And the challenge is going to be making sure that everyone can find their niche and play a part in a way that they build that sense of themselves as having a relationship with the land. So what that means practically is that we're running lots and lots and lots of volunteering sessions where, I mean, at the moment over this last spring, what we've been doing is a lot of grafting sessions. Grafting is obviously, it's fixing the sound to the rootstock. You do a cut in both in order to fit them together. At these volunteering sessions, people generally learn some, and then they take those skills on to, as you can see in the picture, produce loads and loads of our trees. And, given the fact that people only just started it that day, a lot of the time we're finding that people's grafts have been really successful. And I think that gives us a lot of encouragement in what we do too. And I really kind of want to emphasize as well that like people from very different sort of abilities and like, I guess with different kind of energies can come and be part of it and find a way to fit in. We've also as well been recently planting out a load of trees at Glazebury. All the trees that we grafted, well, not all of them, a lot of them will go to community orchards, but quite a few of them are being planted out at Glazebury. And then what we're going to have in July, we're also going to have sessions to learn bud grafting, which is a different kind of grafting that you can only really do in summer. You do it with fresh buds, essentially. So, if people want to get involved, we'd of course love to have you there. If you can kind of commit to doing some regular volunteering, that's even better, because it means you're more likely to be like an extra special superstar grafter. But honestly, even if you can just do an afternoon, that's amazing for us. And it means as well that you can go out and then talk to people about grafting, talk about agroforestry, talk about the farm as well. And I think spreading out those ripples is really the goal that we're looking for with this project. So yeah, please do get involved. Check out the website. We'll make sure as well that all the bud grafting workshops will be in the newsletter that we get from Kindling. But yeah, brilliant.
Thanks, Solvi. Okay, so normally it's not just, as Solvi says, it's a whole community project, and we do want to work with the wider community, from schools, youth groups, uniform groups, garden clubs. You could have your own orchard already. You might be wanting to start up an orchard, have some spare ground. So we are going to be reaching out to the whole wider community. We're going to do, as we're doing tonight, we're doing talks, but we're also going to do workshops in the autumn on tree care and how to start your own fruit tree orchard. We have got 3,000 heritage fruit trees, pears, apples and plums to give away this autumn. So if you are interested, if you've not done the grafting already and taken a few home, or you want a few more, please do spread the word. And we're very excited to talk about how we can make our food and farming more sustainable. So if you want us to come out to your village hall or your school, please do get in touch and we'll come and see you. So yeah, if you want any more information, there is the website kindling.org.uk. We are on social media, Facebook, and there's my email address, agroforestry@kindling.org.uk. Please do drop us a line, get in touch, and we'll see how we can work with you. because it's a really, like as you can tell, we're all very enthusiastic about the project. And we hope we can infuse you to get involved as well. So you may be aware that it's coming. We are trying to buy a farm, and you can be part of it by getting some shares in the farm and helping us to revolutionize the food and farming system. So but that is the presentation. Thank you very much for your time. I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. Okay, everyone's still there? Great. Any questions from anyone out there in the chat, please fire away.
Can I ask something?
Hello, hello, Alison. Yeah,
Hi.
go ahead. Yeah.
Just switch my camera on as well. The light is not a flattering angle, so apologies for that. Thanks for a really great talk. It's really, really interesting. I came along to one of your grafting sessions actually, and I think my rootstock's definitely happy.
Oh,
not
brilliant.
Sure about my graft yet.
Oh, well.
So I suppose one question would be, how
Yeah.
long will it take for a graft to actually kind of start showing life?
What variety was it? Do you know, Alison?
So it was the rootstock was MM106, and then I had I chose Chiver's Delight mainly for the name.
Oh, right. That's an unusual heritage one, that is. Yeah, it's a great name. Dan was saying to me earlier today, they can sit there doing nothing, looking completely dormant, and then suddenly sprout into life in June. So don't give up on it yet.
Oh, okay.
But any buds below the grafting union where the tape is, you should rub them off.
Oh, okay, because they're growing quite strongly now.
So yeah, if you rub them off, it will force the other buds above to come into action. Hopefully, yeah.
I will do that. I will definitely do that because they are going great guns.
Yeah, your rootstock's definitely alive. Though.
Yeah, it's happy, really happy. So I'll do that. My other question was, I just wondered whether there's been any sort of research about the impacts on like the soil fungi in terms of like the sort of that sort of environment in terms of in a mixed setting. So where you've got the trees and you've got crops, is there kind of research to say that actually like the diversity below the soil is better as well?
I think in any more diverse system where you've got some shade, because basically the problem is sunlight's essential for plant growth, but it's not great for soils. You shouldn't have bare soils, but it oxidizes the organic matter. Bare soils, the nutrients leach out of. So in a more diverse system, you're going to have more organic matter, so you're going to have more soil creatures, invertebrates, and hopefully more fungus, yes. But I can't off the top of my head think of anyone who's done. There must have been some done on the mycorrhiza and the other interesting fungi that you can get in an agroforestry system. But I would imagine the soil is much healthier, yeah.
Yeah, great, thanks.
So Lily has just asked, thank you, very inspiring. What sort of tree/crop mixtures do you think you'll be using?
Okay, so it's going to be apple trees, pear trees, plums, gages, damsons, some hazel and some cherry. And then these will be in rows. And then in the alleys, we'll probably grow legumes, beans, peas. I think Helen's quite interested in some lentils, but pulses of some kind, but I'm not sure. We could give them a try, but certainly other vegetables, potatoes, and then we want to grow some cereals. And the idea is that the Kindling Farm is not just a normal farm where food is produced, but it's also a bit of a community hub where people can take some of the produce like the wheat and start a bakery. We might grow barley, they could make beer, we certainly have apples for cider. And then there's a whole education of different generations going on and businesses starting from this hub. So it could be really, really exciting actually, yeah. Any more questions, or we'll call it a day, and I'll check if it's recorded. Okay.
Just to add, if anybody thinks of a question, please do feel free to email us or get in touch.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to follow up or anything, if something comes to you afterwards and you feel on the spot here, that's totally fine.
But thank you very much for your time, and we'll maybe see you at a grafting session in the future. Thank you very much. Bye bye, everyone.